I'm Frank Vaughn. It is December 8th, 2025. Obviously, I'm back in the office. I'm back at home. Taking the setup on the road with me was a complete waste of time because when you're on the road, you're not going to spend 8 to 10 hours a day prepping videos locked in some bedroom or hotel room. It just seems like a total waste of time. So in the future, I'm going to be doing that very differently. And I could talk about the abysmal jobs report that we had, that everybody on the left is celebrating. This came 3 days ago, or 4 days ago now, I guess, where they're celebrating tens of thousands of part-time jobs being created while the depletion of full-time work and Stellantis leaves, and basically these companies are taking government handouts and walking out of the country anyway. As the economy in Canada falls apart and we're being gaslit about how great everything is, and we're literally in a recession right now, and I'm being force-fed by people who should know better that Mark Carney is a different beast and he's really good for Canada, even to the point where I was having a conversation yesterday with some folks who were kind enough to donate a tagged deer to us. Talk about a kingly gift when somebody comes along and says, "Hey, would you like a deer? We have too much." Remember, we had the whole poaching incident that happened here in the valley, so it kind of turned us off doing our own hunting this year because we just didn't want any problems. Not that it had anything to do with us, but you know how things go sometimes when you're dealing with officials being in your own backyard. So we just kind of turned down our own efforts and decided we weren't going to do it this year. And lo and behold, someone decided to generously donate a deer. But anyway, we were having coffee. And it turns out that person went to the Saskatchewan Party Convention, which happened a couple weeks back. I think it was November 22nd, 23rd, 24th, something like that. And the keynote, of course, is the premier. Maybe not the keynote, but I mean, one of the most important speeches that's given is the premier's speech. And even he said, we might be able to get along with Mark Carney. He seems like a great guy. So to put a bow on what I'm going to talk about in politics today, because I really just don't want to. It does appear that Daniel Smith and Scott Moe haven't got the message of the last 150 years about how the relationship with Ottawa hasn't served Western interests. They're still going to try and deal with this Liberal government as though they will somehow be good for the West. Oh, fake jobs reports. The status quo. Is it any wonder why I just don't even want to talk about it today? So I'm going to talk about something else. I'm going to talk about the nature of existence. I don't think I've ever dedicated a conversation just to the nature of existence, but I think today, the anniversary of my father's departure from the earth, December 8th, 2008, if you're listening, you didn't see the opening placard. And what an interesting day it was, and a set of experiences that departure touched off in my life. Now, death, in the end, bestows a seeming permanence on the relationship that you had with your loved ones, or even, I guess, your enemies, you could say. A permanence that wouldn't be possible if human existence wasn't framed in the concept of beginnings and endings. It's pretty much all humans know. Life is cyclic. The planet is cyclic. Human life is cyclic. We're passing it on with each generation. But the individual life seems to have a very firm beginning and seems to have a very firm ending. And we spend a good chunk of our time while we're here arguing about the nature of the eternal soul and the spiritual and what it all means. And I concluded, before my father passed from this earth, that it doesn't matter, that debate is irrelevant because human existence is framed in the way that it's framed, and I believe it is purposefully framed or purposefully framed the way that it is for a given reason. There isn't a single human being, and this is why religious practice and spiritual belief is framed as belief and faith. There isn't a single human being alive that knows for certain that the soul is eternal. It's an impossible thing to know. It's actually impossible to know on a human level that the good Lord above exists. That's why we call it faith. That's why we call it belief. It requires a certain degree of belief because it's not as real, quote unquote real, and tangible as that which is right in front of you. This video, which is definitely real. You'll never see any AI content on my channel, or the desk that I'm sitting at, which has a firmness, which has a a reality to it. In spite of the fact that if you dial into the desk and you look at its molecular structure, it's mostly made up of empty space. It certainly seems to be right here. The nature of the eternal soul is such that if a human being, while they were existing on earth, knew that their soul was eternal and that life had no lasting consequences, that whatever darkness you engaged in or whatever light you brought to the planet, whatever experiences you had, whatever loves that you had, which were impermanent because eventually we all have to go back to dust. One of the things I'm learning as I age, now 45, is first off, my father's generation is disappearing. It's disappearing for a while. The people that had meaning in his life, his contemporaries, they're all fading away like stars, twinkling and fading out in the sky. But it's not just his generation, it's also mine. One of the experiences I had after my father died was I was sitting at my table probably 6-7 months later with a man named Devin. Devin and I became friends. We engaged in a community project together. That's how we met, and we became solid friends. And he had lost his father some 10 months before I lost mine. I believe that was the time frame anyway. We're sitting there at not this very table, but a different kitchen table. We were having a few scotches, and we were chatting and memorializing our parents, our fathers. And the light in the kitchen never happened before, never happened since. It just started flickering on and off, on and off, on and off. And we were sitting there and we were watching it. It went on for maybe the span of 10, 12 seconds. Certainly seemed like at least 10 or 12 seconds. Seemed like it was longer, but being realistic. But the clock on the stove never reset, and the compressor on the fridge never stopped running because it was running in the background. The only thing that happened was that light flickered. And it could be a coincidence. But we both found it very interesting because we both felt that there was this presence around us in the wake of our father's death, almost like it wasn't quite the end. And there was a number of other experiences like, and again, you can chalk it up to coincidence. And I'm going somewhere. Stick with me here. Hopefully you'll stick with me. We were running a greenhouse that spring, and we had a forced air oil furnace. And I had something like my spring expenses involved $7,000 to $8,000 in 2009 dollars, so it's a lot more valuable of seed that was in that greenhouse, all sprouting and all in various stages of growth, getting ready for the market coming up and the gardens that we would plant. And I was awoken from my sleep by a very vivid dream of my father. And in the dream, I was sitting at a desk, at his desk, because one of the first things I did after he parted this earth was I took over his desk. Within a couple days, I moved all my stuff into it, and I thought, now I'm at the helm of the ship. I got to keep going, right? Dad always said life was for the living. Don't dwell on the past. Don't dwell on death too much. Live your life was basically his advice, and so I did. Stepped into his shoes as fast as I could. And so in the dream, I was sitting at that desk, doing my own thing, and Dad just walked into the room from beside me, and he put his hand on my arm, and he said, "You didn't think I'd leave you hanging, did you?" And I woke up, and I swear I could feel that hand still on my arm, and I was in a heightened emotional state, to say the least. And I woke up, and I couldn't get back to sleep, and I thought, what am I going to do with myself? I'll go down to the greenhouse, and I'll get to work. It was something like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, something like. And I went down to the greenhouse, and wouldn't you know it, but the oil furnace had died. It had malfunctioned through the night. And I got down to the greenhouse, and the temperature was hovering, the air temperature was hovering somewhere between 0 and 1. If I had waited a little longer, if I hadn't got there, the entire greenhouse would have froze, and my $7,000 worth of seed that I was germinating would have all died, and my season would have been ruined, and I have no idea what my life would have looked like if it wasn't for that dream, and if it wasn't for that hand waking me from that dream. Now, over the intervening, I would say 10 months, between the time that he died and the time that we rebuilt that greenhouse, because it was that fall, somewhere around mid to end of October, I walked up to the greenhouse and I put my foot on the side of it. Dad and I had built that greenhouse along with a lot of other help, and we had built it from scrap wood because we had no money. We built it from every type of scrap wood, and it wasn't looking very good. It was starting to lean. So I put my foot on the side of it and I gave it a push. And that greenhouse moved about 2 inches and stayed there. And I said to my wife, I think we have to build a greenhouse and we got to build it fast. And it was a custom hip wooden structure. So post dug down into the ground with a little bit of gravel. It was how we rebuilt it, but it was an involved thing. We didn't have any equipment, so we had to dig all the trenches by hand. And we're talking, I dug them down. The trench itself was about 5 feet deep. That's where the O-pipe was to drain it because of the lay of the land. And then the individual post holes were even deeper than that. But anyway, I recall the entire time between that December, the December he left, and the October, where we started rebuilding that greenhouse, I was certain that Father's presence, that he was around, that something was around, something that I couldn't see beyond myself. There was a lot of different experiences that just led me to believe that. And I recall that October, sitting there drinking some wine with my wife in the middle of our project, because I will confess, I drank a lot of alcohol for that period of time during that summer. Did a lot of work, but also did a lot of drinking as I processed the departure of my dad. So we were sitting there. It was the middle of the afternoon. We were drinking our wine that somebody had gave us. And I look up the sky, and I see this eagle just flying high up in the sky. And I looked at my wife, and I said, he's gone. Whatever presence was with us for that period of time, it left in that moment. And from that time forward, I haven't had any of those special encounters with Dad, because it's kind of a thing. I mean, if the soul is eternal, you want to hope that it moves on. There's people who believe that the departed are just waiting for you on the other side, sitting around waiting for you to show up, which I think is really narcissistic. I don't think that's how it works. I don't know how it works, but I don't think that's how it works. And maybe you meet them again, maybe you don't, because I don't know. But you want to hope that the people that you loved and the souls that you had a relationship with are continuing their journey. So to bring this all back around, and the reason this is fresh on my mind is I was having this conversation with the person who attended the SAS Party convention. A lot of this stuff came up, and, you know, sometimes people might wonder, well, why would you believe at all? You know, like, what kind of God would allow Earth to become such a cesspool and allow so much evil to go on? You know, and I have my answers for that. I just don't think that's how it works. I think maybe there's a potentiality that the Lord could lay his hand on earth and fix all of these problems. But what would be the point of human existence if there wasn't some kind of free will, if you didn't have to self-discipline yourself, or for that matter, completely forego self-discipline and then suffer the consequences for it when you find out that this isn't all there is? I think the reason that I am certain that this is a created plane of existence, that this planet's created, that human existence is created, is by merit of its existence itself. Because this concept of beginning and endings, which I started this diatribe with, is very limited to the human experience. In order for the human experience to exist, in order for any of this reality to function in whatever way it functions, because I don't think any of us really understand what holds the whole damn thing together. In order for it to function at all, something always was, something always is, and something will always be. Existence never began and never ended, and you can't wrap your head around that because you're a human being. You're in the middle of an existence which you know to be impermanent. You came into the world and you will leave the world, and there isn't a single person who has avoided that series of living in consequence. So to me, that's the first and primary proof that existence itself is eternal, and that there's something beyond the human experience that permeates the entire thing. And, you know, in terms of personal experience, I've had enough magic in my life, and I've had my share of tragedy too. It's not like I've just waltzed my way through life and there hasn't been seemingly infinite sadness at different times. I think that's just part of it. I think that's how it works. And I think that if you knew you had an eternal soul, if you knew that when you died, you automatically went somewhere else, either to return here because some religions believe in reincarnation, or to wait for the resurrection, or any number of beliefs that try to explain what it is that's going on here. I think if you knew that there was more to it, you wouldn't live your life to the fullest, however it is that you decide to live it. Now, I like to believe that people struggle to bring good into the world, live in the light, so to speak, live a godly existence. Personally, for me, I found the most wisdom I could ever derive from any source through Christian teachings, through Christianity itself. Although my view at times is often heretical, but I keep it largely to myself. I tend to expand my knowledge way outside of canon. I tend to look at the early history of the time since the time immediately after the passing of Jesus from this earth, the 300 years, the 300 to 400 years that began the Christian saga. I tend to put a lot of weight on what happened there and what has happened since. And I often don't talk about it because, honestly, I don't want to mess with anybody's faith. If you found peace and you found some spiritual wisdom through whatever path you found it through, I don't want to interfere with that. I believe there's I know there's and I can't think of the chapter and I can't think of the wording, but we're very specifically advised in the Bible, in the New Testament, that woe be to the person who leads any of my children astray. And I don't want to be that person. But obviously I've thought about this, and I've thought about it very deeply. And I think there's a lot that we can glean from early Christian history that tells us that maybe we don't have the full picture in modern times through the modern canon. But I do find it really interesting as well, as a side note, that of all the religions on earth, whether we're talking about Buddhism, we're talking about Hinduism, we're talking about Islam, we're talking about any number of faiths, there's only one faith alone, that gets attacked and mocked and ridiculed with abandon, with absolutely no earthly defender, and that's Christianity. Churches get burned, nobody cares. Bands have concerts where they got upside down crosses and they're burning them. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It happens all the time. You don't see effigies of Muhammad being burned. You never see a concert where you have the Star of David on fire. It just doesn't happen. You don't see images of the Buddha being defamed and destroyed. Only Christianity is so hated that it is openly mocked. The recent Olympic fiasco where they mocked the Last Supper with a bunch of trans people. It only happens to Christianity. And I think there's wisdom there, because what is Christianity? What is the New Testament? What is the body of wisdom that came down to us from the lineage of Jesus? Setting the Old Testament aside, let's just look at what happened from Jesus forward. It's a religion largely of mercy. It's not without its anger. It's not without taking belts off and whipping people for trading money in the temple. And it has its nuances, but it's a religion of mercy. It's a religion of the golden rule. It's a belief system treating each other with decency and not fixed to the rigidity of some kind of formal written law, but really just tapping into the fundamental wisdom inside yourself about what is right and what is wrong. And nothing has ever been more hated. And to me, that just is a sign that it is something very pure and something to think about and something to contemplate and something to study, far beyond the confines of a church, far beyond the confines of a specific collection of texts that excludes dozens and dozens and dozens of other texts, a collection of texts that ignores early Christian history and how rich it actually was before the Church of Rome took everything over. But again, I don't like to talk about it very much. To get back to the point, what is the point? The point is, it's not just my father who's passed away. Devin, the man that I sat and had that conversation with about our dads, he's gone too. Died suddenly, not long ago. And then you go looking for your old high school mates and people that you've hung out with in life, and you find out they're gone too. There's a lot of people, a lot of contemporaries of mine in their 40s who are not here anymore. It's shocking to me, actually, how many have passed on since 2022. And, I've been in a process wherever I have spare time, reaching out to the ones that are still here just to say hello, even if not much else. I'm still here. Thank the Lord I'm still here because my family needs me. And maybe other people too. Maybe you guys need me. Maybe you want what I bring to the table. I try to bring honesty to the table. I try to frame my work and my video work and the news that I report. I try to frame it with a drive towards honesty and something that maybe qualifies or meets the quality or the standard of my own Christian beliefs. It's a struggle, because nobody's perfect. Over the next few months, I'm going to focus on something that I've made progress on in the past and have fallen by the wayside multiple times. I want to stay alive. I want to stay in the game. God willing, I will be able to. I'm going to do some extended fasting. I'm going to probably 7 to 10 day fast with 6-day feeding windows, strictly carnivore. And by April and May of this year, I am going to be a different person, and that is the end of that story. Too long have I delayed, and it is a shame to me to see so many souls, healthy people that didn't allow themselves to get fat the way that I have, are gone. And I don't know why. Is it drug overdoses? Is it the medical experiment? I don't know what took these guys in their 40s, but there's a lot of them. But to circle back around to a thought I don't think I finished off on. If you knew that your soul was eternal, if you didn't have the limitations that are set upon you by this human existence or by the existence of any other thing, really, if there wasn't a barrier between you and that knowledge, the permanence of your experience, the lasting impression of your life and the lives of those who have touched you and are no longer here, wouldn't have lasting value when you discover the eternal soul's journey after you leave this life. The impressions set upon you by that impermanence leave a lasting impression on something that is permanent, which is eternity. It's an incredible system. It's an incredible system. And it's very difficult for me to not look around and see the magic, the utter magic that is life and existence, and not see some kind of divine hand in it. And that encompasses the tragedies. I mean, what would life be without free will? What would life be without the struggle? I'm not really sure that an ideal picture of existence is just a permanent state of one or the other. The struggle between the light and the dark is what gives life its real magic. At any rate, I'm Frank Vaughn, and we'll get back to that struggle in the next one.